and
Yes.
share with the group a little bit about what you're currently doing right now and what you did before.
Right now, I have the opportunity to do something that really has that God's led me to, which is executive coaching and leadership development for businesses. Uh, I started out in corporate America. I was in a large construction business for about 17 years, and was able to work my way up into an executive leadership role, and got lots of great experience with leadership development, with strategic planning, and all it takes to run a business. What's interesting, though, is through all of that, you would have looked at my resume, you would have looked at what I was doing and thinking, "Wow, she's really crushing it. She's doing great things." Um, what I came to realize is I was not okay in that situation, and things had just gotten hard. And God came in and redirected me and moved me toward a real calling and an opportunity to use my giftedness, um, but challenged me to make the hardest decision of my life, which was to leave my position in corporate America, not knowing what I was going to do next. And so that was a real cool journey to
Yeah.
be on with God.
And would you say a lot of times, how did you know it was time to make that move? You were probably earning a pretty good salary. You're in a key role. You work yourself up to a big corporation, and now you're switching gears to do something you probably did not realize you were going to do, and you didn't know where it was going to go. How did you know it was time to make that move?
You know, companies change, and a lot was going on within my particular company. I was reporting to a CEO. We worked really well together, and he ended up needing to leave the business. At the point he left the business, I realized that I also probably needed to leave the business. But the truth is, even before he left, and before that became evident, it really wasn't working for me anymore. My anxiety levels had gotten really high. It just, I was striving. I would drive into work and just have this hard time breathing, right? Things just weren't working, but I just continued to stay in it, even though I felt that God was trying to lead me through it and out of it. So I think I stayed in probably longer than I needed to, but I think the difficulty of staying became greater than leaving.
Yeah. Now these days, you work on executive coaching. And when you sit down and talk with people, what does it mean to live on purpose? If someone came to you and says, Michelle, what does it mean to live on purpose? What's your advice? Is this something you realize over time? Does the purpose change throughout your life? What does it mean to live on purpose?
I didn't know. I didn't know what it meant to live on purpose. And when God really got a hold of my life, which is interesting, it was about 10 years ago, actually in June, 10 years ago, that God really changed my life. And, and it was God that led me to a purpose. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to find it. God just started opening these doors. And the way I started to realize I was living on purpose is because it everything lined up with my giftedness. I rediscovered joy. I hadn't experienced joy in so long that when God brought that back into my life, I didn't recognize it. Um, and I absolutely love what I do.
Yeah. But it also took time as well too. You had to wrestle through some of those things and kind of figure out what brought you joy and all of those things. And it didn't come overnight. It was a journey.
It was definitely a journey over years,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question though.
No, no, no. And I think a lot of times is, do you feel like a lot of times purpose changes with time? That as you get older, sometimes what's a priority may change over a period of time. And I say this for some of these things. At certain portions of your life, you're more passionate about certain things versus other things.
I do think that. And for many years, within the business and learning all the leadership skills and all, I've come to realize that that was my purpose at the time. And even though it was really difficult at times, I was learning so much that God is now using. I was learning all the leadership skills. I was having the opportunity to function in different levels of leadership. So now I'm able to coach people that are in executive leadership who are high potentials moving from a mid-level manager to a senior leader. But also I've had the opportunity to travel to Africa and do leadership development programs. And so God uses every part of us, every experience, the hardships, and brings those out. And so my purpose for a period of time was to learn those skills, and now my purpose is to apply those skills.
Yeah, yeah. How do you know when you are doing something the Lord is calling you to do versus convincing yourself it is His will when it really isn't what you want?
So I got to ask you guys something. Does anyone in here enjoy a good accomplishment, completing a goal? Does anyone here tend to strive and be very, goal-oriented? Raise your hand. Thank you. I'm not alone. I'm really good at striving. I'm really good at seeing a goal and wanting the accomplishment. And one of the muscles that God has continued to build in me is to recognize when I'm striving and getting ahead of God and when it's God's plan. And oftentimes, I can now sense it in myself where I start fighting this uphill battle for something that I think is important. And I can notice it faster. And as soon as I can release that, that's when God starts working. That's when God starts opening doors and showing me His way rather than me getting ahead of Him and going in my direction.
Got it. And also, for someone, let me wrote this down. For someone who did everything right, built the credentials, took the safe, prestigious path, and now feels that their path shrinking under them, what I'm trying to say is a lot of times, how do you know you're on the right path? How do you know you're making the right decisions? How do you know which direction to choose?
I don't know that we always do know.
Yeah.
I do think it's important that we continue to take the steps. I think it's really easy to allow fear to slow us down, to allow busyness to cause us to not move forward, to not take a step. And something that I've learned is if I'm taking steps, God is really faithful to come in and redirect my steps. And I'm going to give you two examples that happened early on after leaving my corporate job. I started volunteering at an organization called Refuge for Women. So it was an organization that helps women move beyond human trafficking and really learn the life skills to be productive members of society and get their lives back together. And within a few months, they wanted to offer me the assistant director role there. And I thought, that's a good organization. It's a Christian organization. We're helping women really overcome some hard things. And so I said yes. Well, God said no. It was really interesting how God closed that door. And I thought, but God, this is purposeful, and I love this. And so then a couple weeks later, it literally happened within a few weeks. I had been participating in something called Bible Study Fellowship, and they had asked me to become a leader in Bible Study Fellowship. And they said, take some time and pray about it. And I didn't. I didn't take any time to pray about it. I just decided to say no. And God redirected that so clearly and led me to the verse, Isaiah 6:8, which happens to be the verse that was a core verse from the Malaysia conference. Who shall I send? Send me. And so God led me to that verse, and which helped me to recognize I needed to call back and say yes to Bible Study Fellowship. I didn't understand it all at the time, but now when I look back on both of those decisions, it was so core to what I've been able to do today. If I had ended up being the assistant director for Refuge for Women, I would have never been able to follow this journey that God's had me on. And if I had said no to Bible Study Fellowship, I wouldn't have stayed the course and learned my Bible and spent all of that time in the Word that has been so instrumental in my relationship with God.
Michelle, let me ask you a quick question. You are now an executive coach. What do you find purpose in being an executive coach? What gives you purpose?
To me, there's nothing like coming alongside people who want to grow, who want to make a difference. Um, Sometimes I have the opportunity to coach Christians, and sometimes I have the opportunity to coach people who may become Christians in their future. But I have such an opportunity to help people get unstuck, help people gain confidence, be the encouragement that people need, ask good questions. You had said something the other day, and I thought it was so interesting because, um, you know, I coach people in C-suite positions, mid-level management, and entry-level positions. Who do you think has the highest level of imposter syndrome of that group? Who do you think? C-level? I'm going to say all of them, because no matter where we are, we're we can be afraid of or intimidated of something in that next position that we don't know yet. I have the opportunity to come alongside people and encourage them and help them move through that. I have the opportunity to come alongside people and help them to recognize their gifting, their skill sets, and remember who they are and who they're not. Get unstuck. There's just really nothing like it.
Yeah. Hey, let me run through a couple of case scenarios and let's wrestle through some of those things that may apply to some of the people here in this room. What would you say to a person who's sitting here right now and they're in their job and they do earn a decent but I don't, it's a dead end job. I'm not excited about it. Don't like my boss, don't like what I do. I'm not sure where to go and on. What's your advice to them?
I just always think it's wise to pause, to pray, to read the word of God, to seek wise counsel. If you're in a job that doesn't feel like that's your future, God's going to help you to move forward in the direction that you should be moving in. God's going to open doors. God's going to bring someone into your life that encourages you or recommends a direction. When you pause and you pray about things, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, things start to become a little more clear. When we make rash decisions and jump into something or jump away from something without consulting God, without consulting our Bibles and praying about it, it can often lead us in a direction that God didn't intend.
Yeah. And sometimes one of the things also, a wonderful advice I also learned, Michelle, for some of you guys who are sitting there, man, what in the world should I do? I could do this job, not crazy about it, all of those things, but yet it earns a living. But I'm more passionate about this. One advice I once got from someone is sometimes God places you in a position where you have no passion for your job, but gives you money to do something you're more passionate about that you can't earn a lot of money in. Case in point, for the longest time, I was very passionate about starting Resource Global. But in the early days, it wasn't going to earn me very much money. And so I started doing that as a side project. But during that period of time, I would take on different roles. And in time, I could do some of the things in terms of operations and everything like that. But yet, during those early days, it gave me the money that I need to keep working on Resource Global as a side project over time. Well, over time, Resource Global became what it is now. And now I'm able to work on it full time. Sometimes God can place you in a position where you're good at a job, you're not passionate about it, but it does open the door for to do something you're passionate about.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And in the 17 years that I was in my role in the construction industry, there were times where it was really difficult and challenging, and there were times that were exciting and new. And I learned in both of those times, and I needed that experience to do what God ultimately was leading me to do. So you're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then and here's another thing that I would love to get your comments for, especially for those who are younger here in this room. You never know what God is going to use your experience in a job to set you for something. For instance, David, a lot of times, what was David before he started? He was what? He was a shepherd boy. He was the one taking care of the father's sheep. He was the one watching the father's sheep. Can you imagine how boring and monotonous that job was? And yet at the same time, God placed them in that position. He used that time to allow him to learn solitude. He used that time to learn how to protect the sheep. He used that time to protect them. He had to learn what it meant to create and care for this little flock so that in the future he would care for the bigger flock in the nation of Israel. And so you never know exactly what those opportunities are and how to use those opportunities to serve the Lord.
That is such a great example. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for those who are a little bit older as well too, and I would probably count some of us who are sitting here, how do you've gotten near the end and you're trying to figure out what that next step is. If I'm sitting there to you and says, Michelle, how do I find purpose as I get older? I've accomplished what I wanted to do in my career and all this stuff. What would your advice be to those guys?
That's so interesting. I have a good friend who was moving toward retirement, and she said, "I hear all these people talking about retirement, and they can't wait to just sit on the couch and watch TV." And she goes, "I can't wait to do more and get into ministry and start teaching and traveling." And what's interesting is God has opened the doors for her. She's now in the prison ministry and making a huge difference there. She's now teaching these women's Bible studies that are making a huge difference, and mentoring other women to teach women's Bible studies, and just having the time of her life. But I'm not sure that I'm not sure God's ever done with us,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in different chapters of our lives, we have different opportunities, and how fun to discover what that is once you have more time and
Yeah.
space for that.
In your coaching, what are the consistent questions you're constantly getting of where people are stuck?
It does have a lot to do with fear. I notice
Mhm.
that I think people often get stuck because of the imposter syndrome or fear of failure. I think that can be a real hindrance for people. But I also notice that it's it's often we can become very task oriented when we are working toward our goals and our accomplishments. And what I notice is that as we're in the workplace, as we're moving up within our positions, we can focus on those tasks and forget to pause and actually consider, to do some planning. I call them quadrant two activities. Quadrant two is a Franklin Covey concept, but it's things that are important that aren't urgent. And these are the things that we have to be really intentional about to make sure they happen. But one of those is planning, right? Another one that falls into that category, time with our family and friends. And another big one, time with God. So just continuing to make sure that we're not just always tasking, we're not staying so busy that we lose focus on the bigger picture, but we're pausing to consider, we're pausing to spend time with God, and we're pausing to do the things that are important, but not necessarily urgent,
God.
which tend to drive our time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Michelle. Let me ask you one last question. Is there a question that I didn't ask you that you wish I would ask you about purpose?
Wow. About purpose. Do you guys have a question That he didn't ask me about purpose? I'm not thinking of one. I think you did a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, can I hold Jackson? I hope you don't mind. I'm going to put you on the spot because you are the pastor in the room, and Pastor Jackson Crum was my pastor over at Park Community Church in Chicago for a long, long time. Jackson, putting you on the spot, what would you say to your congregation members that comes to you and say, Pastor, I don't know what I'm doing. Should I go into full-time ministry? I love the Lord. Should I go into missionary and all this stuff? What would you say to those guys? Thank you so much. Michelle, thank you for everything.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a little challenge for each of you that I would love for you to just take a few minutes to do over the next couple of days, but it's around purpose. And what I'd love for you each to do is just spend about 10 minutes getting quiet, getting comfortable. And I would love for you to consider your life from the vantage point of meeting Jesus face to face. And Jesus asks, what have you done with what I gave you? What do you want the answer to be? And if it's different than what you think it might be based on what you're doing today, consider what you want it to look like. Consider what you want to be able to say to Jesus and move toward that. Spend some time in that quadrant 2, important, not urgent, and consider, what is my purpose and how can I continue to move in that direction? Thank you.